Listen, you think he's not interested. You are interpreting the signals completely wrong. You think distance means disinterest. You think silence means he's moved on. But what if I told you that he thinks about you more than you can imagine? And here comes the part that will sound crazy. The colder he behaves, the more obsessive he could actually be. Stay with me because this is going to be wild. Most women completely overlook these signs. They give up just when he starts to become possessed. They go away exactly when his head is working overtime to understand them. But there is a specific sign that reveals everything. And if I tell you what it is, you'll replay every interaction you've had with him. You'll see patterns that you've completely overlooked. I'm going to show you the hidden signals that reveal that he's constantly thinking about you, even if he acts like he doesn't care, even if he seems cold or distant, even if every superficial sign says he's not interested. And here's what no one tells you. There is a psychological phenomenon that happens in a man's mind when he is attracted to someone but tries to hide it. And once you understand that, you'll never misinterpret his signals again. But first, we need to talk about the biggest mistake you're probably making right now, the painful confusion. Why everything you think you know is upside down. Imagine that. It takes him hours to write back. When you meet him, he seems casual, almost too casual. He doesn't start any more conversations. And when you're together, he acts like you're just another person in his day. You start to question everything. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe he was never interested. Maybe I should just move on. But here's what's actually happening, and that will turn around everything you thought you knew. When a man is deeply attracted to you, his mind can enter a state that psychologists call defensive avoidance. Sounds invented, right? But stay with me. Here's what you need to understand. Men don't show interest in the way women expect. When a man feels something intense, he doesn't always pursue. Sometimes he withdraws. It creates distance. Why? Because attraction creates vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of losing control, fear of feeling exposed. And when a man feels these things, his instinct is not to get closer, but to protect himself. So his mind does something counterintuitive. He tells him to retreat, to regain control. And here's the part that makes you rethink every cold reaction you've gotten. The more he thinks about you, the more he might act like he doesn't. Because thinking about you destabilizes him. It makes him aware. It makes him vulnerable. So he creates emotional distance while his mind remains fixated on you. And this is where it gets interesting. There are 7 unmistakable signs that reveal this. And sign number 4, when you see it, there's no doubt he's obsessed. First, let me show you the patterns that reveal what's really going on in his head. The hidden signs of what his behavior is actually telling you. Before we go deeper, do me a favor. If that already made you think of a certain man, stop for a moment and really deal with that feeling, because what's next will connect dots you've been ignoring. Let's move on. Sign number 1. He's watching you when he thinks you're not looking. This one is massive, and most women miss it because they focus on how he behaves directly towards them instead of how he behaves around them. Men are attentive in a calm way. When he really thinks about you, he studies you without realizing that he does. He notices how you move, how you talk to others, how you laugh, how you react when someone else gets your attention. You might catch him looking at you in a room and then immediately looking away. This quick look away is important. That's not boredom. This is awareness mixed with restraint. That's him, how he catches himself being too focused on you. And here's the key detail. If a man doesn't care, he doesn't look twice. He does not pursue. He doesn't notice any patterns. In digital spaces, this is reflected in a quieter way. He looks at your stories consistently, but doesn't respond. He is one of the first spectators, but never the one to commentate. He notices changes, new photos, subtle shifts, but remains silent. Silence here is not absence, it is containment, because if he allows himself to engage freely, he risks revealing how much attention you already have. And attention is the door to bonding. If he's watching you without interfering, it means you're already living in his head without needing his presence. Sign number 2, he remembers little things you never thought were important. This is where it becomes undeniable. You mention something in passing, a stressful week, a family detail, something you like, something you avoid. Weeks later, of course, he brings it up without making much of a fuss about it. You think maybe he's just paying attention, maybe he's polite, maybe it's a coincidence. It is not. Most men forget details unless those details are emotionally marked. His brain only stores what feels relevant. And relevance is decided by emotional weight. If he remembers things you didn't emphasize, it means that he repeated conversations with you, thought about them, reflected on them. His mind returned to moments that concerned you when you weren't there. This is not a casual interest, that's mental presence. And here's the part that's easy to miss. He may not even know why he remembers, he just does it. Because attraction works first below consciousness. Sign number 3. Other people notice something before you do. This does not come directly from him, it comes from the environment around him. His friends behave differently when you're around. They are watching him. They are watching you. They smile in a way that seems knowing. Sometimes they bring you up casually, as if you're already part of a story that no one has told you about. Men don't always talk openly about attraction, but they hint, they mention names, they ask questions disguised as nothing. If his friends recognize you without you spending much time with them, it means that your name has come up more than once, enough that you have been registered as important. You are no stranger to his inner circle. You are an issue. And men don't repeatedly bring up women who mean nothing. Now, this is where most women get confused because the next sign seems contradictory on the surface. Sign number 4, he reports unexpectedly and then disappears again. That's what drives women crazy, and it's also the strongest indicator that you're on his mind for a lot more than he lets on. He writes you something random, a question, a comment, a moment that reminded me of you. There is no great emotional explanation, no obvious intention, just enough contact to break the silence. The conversation flows, the energy feels familiar, alive. You think, okay, maybe something will happen. Then he withdraws again, days pass, silence returns, and you wonder what you did wrong. Here's the truth. He didn't disappear because the conversation was bad. He disappeared because it was too good. Getting in touch gave him relief. Retreating gave him control. This is approach avoidance in action. His desire draws him to you. His fear pulls him away. So he oscillates. And here's the part that proves you're in his head. These moments in which he speaks up are not accidental. They happen when the tension in him reaches its peak. When thinking about you becomes too loud to ignore. When silence no longer works. If you didn't play a role, there would be no inner conflict, no urge, no cycle. Indifference does not create patterns. And once you see this cycle, you can't miss it anymore, because what looks like inconsistency on the outside is actually emotional regulation on the inside. And there are even more signs unfolding beneath the surface. Sign number 5, he behaves differently around you than with everyone else. This one is subtle, but once you notice it, it becomes impossible to ignore. Observe how he is with other women, with friends, with people he doesn't want to impress. He is relaxed, predictable, almost automatic. Its energy flows without friction. Then watch him with you. Something shifts. Maybe he'll calm down. Perhaps he will become more controlled. Maybe he jokes less or suddenly more. Perhaps his tone will change. Maybe he avoids prolonged eye contact or holds it for a second too long before breaking it. These are not random behaviors. They are reactions of the nervous system. When a man feels emotionally neutral, his body remains neutral. There is no internal disturbance. But if you influence him, his system becomes alert, self-confident, slightly tense. And here's what most women misunderstand. Restrained behavior is not a lack of attraction. It's often the presence of it. Men don't protect themselves from women they don't care about. They don't regulate their words, attitude, or reactions for someone irrelevant. They only become cautious when something is at stake. If he seems more composed, reserved, deliberate around you, it's because he's monitoring himself. And people only monitor themselves if they don't want to mess anything up. Sign number 6, he's testing you but not in an obvious way. Here, men show interest without ever admitting it. He might casually mention another woman, not to make you jealous directly, but to observe your reaction. He might suddenly pull back to see if you're hunting. It might delay plans, change energy, or create slight uncertainty just to see how you handle it. And most women don't even realize they're being tested. They think he's insecure. They think he's inconsistent. They think he is emotionally unavailable. But often he observes. He asks himself questions without saying them out loud. Does she stay calm? Is it losing its center? Does she react emotionally? Is she putting me under pressure? Does she respect herself? Men who feel something real become cautious. They don't want chaos. They don't want emotional volatility. They want to know if being close to you will feel safe or exhausting. So they test the emotional climate. And here's the part that counts. If he didn't care, he wouldn't test at all. He would either chase casually or disappear altogether. Testing only happens when there is investment and uncertainty at the same time. And this is where many women fail without realizing it. They overreact. They are looking for confirmation. They explain themselves. You try to secure the connection. But emotional pressure does not create closeness for men. He creates retreat. The woman who passes these tests is not cold, it is centered. It does not collapse under ambiguity. It does not chase clarity. She leaves him with his own feelings. And that brings us to the final sign, the one that tells you exactly where you stand and what to do next. Sign number 7. He remains present without claiming you. This is the hardest to understand, but it's the most revealing. It does not disappear completely. He does not close the door. He does not move on completely. Even when he is distant, he retains a thread, a reaction here, a check-in there, a subtle acknowledgement of your existence. It keeps you within reach without committing anything. And women often interpret this as hesitation or a lack of seriousness. But psychologically, it's containment. He keeps the connection alive because letting her die would feel like a loss. But fully getting in would require emotional disclosure, which he's not ready for yet. So he floats on the edge, not because he plays games, but because he negotiates internally. And this is where your behavior becomes everything. You can't force him forward. You can't talk him into certainty. You can't analyze it into action. The moment you try to control the outcome, you shift the dynamic out of attraction and into management. And men don't fall in love where they feel managed. What actually draws him closer is your stability, your ability to stay warm without chasing, open without pushing, present without demanding. Men move toward what feels emotionally secure and calm inside. And paradoxically, the woman who doesn't need immediate answers becomes the woman he continues to think about because unresolved tension doesn't go away. It deepens. And here's the truth that most people never tell you. The man who withdraws when he feels something is not weak. He is aware that his emotions carry weight. And weight requires respect. If you can sit in insecurity without losing yourself, without trying to pull him to you or push him away, you become the reference point to which his mind returns again and again. Not because you hunted, not because you convinced, but because you didn't break under silence. And that stays with him. If this resonates with you, if you see him more clearly now than before, take a deep breath. You don't have to act. You don't have to decide anything yet. Clarity comes when pressure is released. And in the next part, you'll see exactly how men go from internal obsession to external action and what silently blocks this shift. Here's what's happening next. And that's the part that most women never get to see because they interrupt it too soon. A man doesn't move from interest to action the moment he feels something. He moves when his inner resistance breaks down, when the mental noise calms down enough for desire to turn into decision. And this process is silent. While you're wondering where you stand, his spirit is negotiating with itself. He weighs up risks. It measures emotional costs. He asks questions that he would never say out loud. What if I lose control? What if I like more than you? What if that changes me? Men do not fear union as much as women. They fear transformation because real attraction threatens identity. It forces him to face parts of himself that he has kept contained. That's why men don't rush forward when they feel something deep. They slow down. And this is where women unwittingly become the reason why things never move forward. They confuse his pause with a lack of interest. They react to silence with pressure. They try to clarify what has not yet settled. But clarity does not come from conversations at this stage. It comes from contrast. Here's what quietly pushes a man from internal obsession to external action. Absence without retreat. Don't disappear. Don't cut him off. Don't punish silence. Just don't chase it. You remain present in your own life. You stay warm when you interact. You don't shrink, but you don't lean forward either. And something begins to happen in his mind. The space you don't fill begins to echo. He notices your absence more than your presence. He feels the lack of emotional pull without knowing how to recreate it. He realizes that he is the one who raises his hand, even if it is subtle. And this is where obsession shifts, because obsession is not built on availability, it is built on contrast. You become the woman who didn't have to pull him closer, the one that didn't demand certainty, the one who trusted herself enough to let him come to his own conclusion. Men move decisively when the decision feels like theirs. And the moment he realizes he's thinking of you, without being induced, without being chased, without being pressured, something clicks. That's when behavior changes. Not dramatically at first, not with explanations, but with consistency. He begins to initiate more intentionally. It closes gaps instead of creating them. He becomes more direct. Not because you asked, but because ambiguity starts to be uncomfortable for him. Here's the key shift. Before that, distance made him feel safe. Now, distance feels like loss, and loss is the one thing men act quickly to avoid. But that only happens if you don't contaminate the process with fear. If you don't force conversations that he hasn't ended internally, if you don't react emotionally to every withdrawal, if you don't try to secure what hasn't fully formed yet, because the moment you do, you're giving it a way out. Pressure gives him justification to withdraw. Stability removes excuses. And here is the hardest truth. If a man never moves forward, it's not because you've waited too long. It's because he never reached the point where losing you felt real. And that's not something you create by pushing. It's something you allow by not hunting. You don't have to perform. You don't have to manipulate. You don't have to get distant or cold. You just have to stay intact, whole, centered, unavailable for emotional chaos. That's what men react to when attraction gets serious. Because a man does not commit himself if he feels wanted. He commits himself when he feels anchored. And anchors don't chase drifting ships. They stay grounded. If you recognize these signs now, don't rush to reinterpret the past. Don't play through every interaction with panic or hope. Just observe. Watch how he behaves when you stop trying to manage the outcome. Observe how his energy shifts when you stop feeling the silence. Watch how presence without pressure changes dynamics. Because the man who is really affected will always return to the woman who did not try to draw him to her, but allowed him to feel the distance himself. If that made you see him differently, comment attentively so I know you're paying attention to what actually matters, and subscribe, because next I'm going to show you exactly what kills this process instantly and why so many women unknowingly push men away at the exact moment they're about to step forward. There is a moment that almost no one talks about. The moment just before a man makes an emotional commitment, not publicly, not verbally, internally. That's the danger zone. Not because things are falling apart, but because they are about to come together. And most women are unknowingly destroying it here. Until now, his attraction has been largely internal, private, contained. He has been thinking, weighing, regulating, observing himself. Observing how you influence him, observing how he reacts to your presence and your absence. But at a certain point, something shifts. Thinking becomes uncomfortable, not painful, unsettling. Because attraction, as it matures, ceases to be a pleasant distraction and begins to become a demand for resolution. His mind does not want to hold tension forever. His nervous system wants relief, and relief comes in two forms for a man: action or detachment. Everything depends on this. When the emotional environment feels calm, safe, non-invasive, he moves forward. When it feels heavy, pressuring, emotionally charged, he breaks up. And here, women completely misunderstand the situation. They see his hesitation and think he needs validation. They feel the silence and think they have to clarify. They feel the distance and think they have to pull him closer. But from his perspective, these actions don't feel like connection. They feel like pressure. Here's something critical you need to understand. Men don't process attraction by talking about it. They process them by sitting in them. Silence is not an avoidance for him, it's digestion. If you interrupt this digestion with emotional demands, even subtle ones, you don't speed up the process. You short-circuit it. You make him feel that his inner world is being invaded before he has organized it. And men fiercely protect unfinished internal processes. That's why timing is more important than intention. You could say the right thing at the wrong moment and permanently change how safe he feels around you, not because your words were wrong, but because his system was not ready. Well, here's the part that's uncomfortable but necessary. When a man is deeply affected, he becomes hypersensitive to emotional imbalance. He begins to scan for signs that getting closer will cost him peace. He observes how you deal with uncertainty. He observes how you deal with silence. He observes whether you become reactive or remain stable, not consciously, instinctively. That's why women who appear low effort at this stage often receive more investment. Not because they are less interested, but because they don't lick fear into the room. Fear is loud for a man's nervous system, even if you don't say it, even if you mask it as concern, even if you disguise it as communication, he feels it. And as soon as he associates closeness with emotional turbulence, attraction collapses into avoidance, not because he has stopped liking you, but because his body has learned that being around you costs him inner peace. That's the part that people rarely accept. Attraction does not die from a lack of interest. She dies from emotional overload. And overload doesn't just come from drama, it comes from subtle pressure. Repeated check-ins, micro-questions, energy shifts if he doesn't respond quickly enough, change of tone, expectation without agreement. All this registers as a demand. Now contrast this with what actually pulls him forward as silence, not cold, not indifference, silence. You don't disappear, you don't withdraw affection, you don't punish silence, you just don't chase resolution. You allow the space to exist without trying to control it. And here's what happens in his mind when you do that. The tension does not dissipate, it is intensifying, but now she has nowhere to escape. He can't blame pressure, he cannot blame conflict, he cannot justify withdrawal. The only thing left is his own desire. And craving, when unblocked, demands expression. That's when his behavior begins to shift in ways that are impossible to fake. He begins to report on purpose, not on impulse. He initiates without an attached excuse. He follows through instead of floating. The energy changes. There is less oscillation, less hot and cold, more direction, not because you did anything, but because you stopped interfering. And this is where women get scared, because giving up control feels like risk. What if he doesn't come forward? What if the silence lasts too long? What if you've read everything wrong? Here's the truth. If he didn't move forward in the absence of pressure, he would never have stayed anyway. All pressure does is delay the inevitable or create a false sense of progress. Real commitment only happens when a man moves because he wants to, not because the environment has driven him into a corner. Well, let's talk about the last mistake that silently ends everything. Spirals of interpretation. When women start monitoring every detail, every delay, every shift in tone, they stop being present. They begin to live in expectation, and expectation carries expectation. Expectation leaks into energy. Energy changes behavior. Behavior changes dynamics. Suddenly, conversations feel heavier, moments feel valued, silence feels charged, and the man doesn't know why, but something feels wrong. He no longer feels invited. He feels he is being watched. And men don't move towards spaces where they feel monitored. They move towards spaces in which they feel accepted without performance. That's why the woman who lets go often becomes the one he returns to, not because it has given up, but because it has stopped grasping. And grasping is what stifles attraction. Here's the reframing that changes everything. Your power does not lie in getting him to choose you. It lies in making your presence emotionally clean. Clean energy is irresistible, no urgency, no tension, no emotional guilt, just warmth without an agenda. And if you're wondering if that means suppressing your feelings, the answer is no. It means not outsourcing your emotional regulation to him. You feel what you feel. You just don't blame him for solving it. This distinction is everything, because a man will lean into emotion when it feels divided, not challenged. Now listen carefully. If a man is really affected by you, he will always come back unless you block the way. He may need time, he may hesitate, he may need space, but interest that has passed into internal ties does not disappear quietly. It either matures or it is destroyed by pressure. There is no third option. And the woman who understands this stops trying to gain behavior and begins to protect the emotional climate. She doesn't hunt, she does not withdraw, it does not manipulate,
She simply stays rooted. And a rooted woman becomes the quiet compass in a man's memory, the one he measures everyone else against. Her absence doesn't just create space, it changes the temperature of the room. Her presence isn't loud, yet it feels like the first deep breath after a long day. Not because she does more, but because she unsettles nothing. This is the fork in the road most women never notice. The instant you stop steering his emotions, he finally meets them undiluted by your worrying, unbent by your urgency. Feelings need room to stretch out and declare their shape. The moment you quit trying to sculpt them, they surface on their own. In that open quiet, he discovers what losing you would actually cost. He senses you aren't clutching him, and the realization makes him reach back not from obligation, but from choice. Silence starts to echo, and every echo carries your name. That's when the mystery dissolves. A man who begins to move toward you then isn't pushed by fear, doubt, or pressure. He's pulled by clarity. The static inside him settles, leaving only what was always true: attraction, respect, interest, and the steady knowledge that you aren't simply a woman, you're the one whose calm feels like a rival. Letting you go would feel like an error he can't unmake. When that moment arrives, your only job is to exist. No nudging, no dissecting, no selling yourself, just presence. Because the man who has truly decided doesn't offer fragments, he comes complete.